Welcome back, everybody. I want to take you through today some notes just dealing with what happens when democracy fails. Why do we want to do this? Largely because, like I told you, at some point along the way, part of what we're trying to accomplish with this unit is to help you appreciate what you have in a democracy and what you have, especially here in America. And it's difficult to really understand and appreciate what you have if you're not able to kind of look on the flip side and see what it would be like if you didn't have it. So that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish today. I'm going to try to move fast. There's a lot of information in here, but I don't want to get bogged down too much. Okay, so part of understanding, why, um, you know, why you should appreciate things, why you should appreciate democracy is understanding what would be in its place, and kind of the anti-democracy in most places where there isn't democracy, you have some form of fascism. Okay, and so what is fascism? Basically, it's a dictatorship, and it can have lots of different names and lots of different, kind of just forms in terms of what the structure is and what the philosophies supposedly are. But what it boils down to, it really is this: that no matter what the structure is, and no matter what they label themselves, and no matter what their philosophy is, it's all geared towards one person or a few people hanging on to power. That's it. Okay, that is the only real philosophy: is to do whatever is necessary so that the people in power can stay in power. Um, Usually, it's totalitarian. In other words, it aims to control everyone's behavior as much as it possibly can, because the thing is people are free, and if they're free to think, then they're going to be free to realize that things aren't right, and they're going to want and desire other things. And ultimately, if the people, uh, are motivated enough, fascist states will fail eventually. So for them to be able to hang on to that power, they need to be able to control people and control their minds and control their lives as much as they possibly can. So typically speaking, in these societies, they put the nation before the individual. They sell that to people. And hey, democracies try to do that too, to put country first, but it's beyond that in a fascist state, to the point where you really don't, you don't have a whole lot of value as an individual. In a fascist state, lives are usually thrown away like it's no big deal, and it's all under this idea of protecting the state and all those kinds of things. But it's an extreme. Okay, they're usually very militaristic. Not just that they have militaries or strong militaries, but the nation puts its worth into the military, and they see themselves as defined by their military. America has, I mean, we spend more money on our military than the next 7 or 8 countries combined. We have the biggest, most advanced military in the history of the world, but we don't define ourselves by our military. We're proud of it, but we don't define ourselves through it. That's not the case usually in fascist states. And then typically there's some form of racism. And I'm not talking, I mean, America has, racial issues for sure. We have a lot of racism in our past, but we don't have, the kind of institutionalized racism that you see in a fascist state. Okay. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. All right. So, how do we recognize fascism? The thing is, that's really difficult. It's because there's not really, like I said, really any true ideology or anything that defines a fascist state. In other words, they don't really believe in anything. They'll say whatever they feel like people want to hear. They'll bend and contort the things however they need to, because really the only belief in a fascist state is the belief in the people in power and those people hanging on to power. Okay. So a lot of times that means tying things together that don't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. And you can see some examples there. For instance, the Nazis combined promises of higher retirement pensions with anti Semitism. Okay. Pulling in different ingredients from all over the place to accomplish their goals. Okay. Um, so today, if you were to go out and find a fascist state, it could range anywhere from socialist, in other words, something kind of communist-like, to something that's just all the way on the other end of the spectrum, super conservative. Again, the beliefs, the philosophies don't really matter. It's just that core of one person or a group of people in power and keeping them there. Okay. And typically speaking, there's not a whole lot of, intellectual stuff that is tied to fascism. It's more about playing on people's feelings, particularly fear. Okay. So whatever it takes to keep people in power. And then usually that means making sure that people are scared. How can we make people scared? We talked about racism earlier, blaming problems on a group of people, dividing people against each other, making them scared of each other, so that even though the guys up the top may be totally abusing their power and treating everyone horribly, they can swoop in and say, hey, I'm going to fix everything and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm the one that really cares about you. You're very right to be scared of these other people or these other countries, but I'm here to take care of you. Okay. And it's one big manipulation. So there are some characteristics, though, that we can look at fascism, even though it's like this big blob that doesn't really stand for much of anything. There are some characteristics that we can look at and we can see in fascist states. Okay, again, they play on fear. They try to keep people upset and angry all the time and afraid of losing things. Okay, usually it comes from some bad event. Okay, the country lost a war or territory was taken away from them, or the economy takes a massive hit and a lot of people lose their jobs. When people are down and out, that's when they're ready to buy into things that normally they would not. When people are scared, tired, afraid, hungry, they will buy crap that they wouldn't normally buy. Okay. And then that's because they're when they're weak and all these other things. That's when these guys swoop in, especially when they're charismatic guys. Think of like a Hitler or someone like that. They come in and they say, "Hey, I got you. I'm going to take care of you. Trust in me. I'm the only one that can do this for you." Okay. So then they usually try to, once they have the power. The other thing that you'll see a lot of times, all the time in a fascist state, is the attempt to control the information. Because if they can control the information, they can control what you think. Okay. So an example I always like to make is North Korea. They don't have the internet. They don't have a free internet where people can go out and search and go wherever they want, just or like we do. You can go literally anywhere on the internet and find whatever you want to find, and it doesn't matter if the website originates here in America or on the other side of the world. In North Korea, there is an intranet. You can only access things that were either created in North Korea or that are approved by their government, because they don't want you going out in North Korea and finding websites over in America and seeing what life is like here, because then they know those people are going to hunger for that. Okay, another great example that I don't have up on the screen here, but if you go back to slavery in the United States, what was one of the things that was illegal for slaves? It was illegal for them to learn how to read. Why? Because their slave owners didn't want them to be reading books and learning that, what they were living in, the situation they were living in, was wrong. That freedom is the way that things are supposed to be, that there are free people out there that are able to do whatever they please and everything else and live their lives the way they see fit. Slave owners did not want slaves seeing that stuff, and so they prevented them from reading so that they could keep them from learning. If you can control the information people have access to, then you can control what they think. Okay. Fascists normally, second to last point there, fascists normally claim to act and speak on behalf of a nation or entire group, and then they draw lines and say, hey, it's us versus them. And it might even be the them might be there in the country. They like to create scapegoats. Go back to Nazi Germany. The Jewish people were not some other country. They were people, they were Germans that lived there. But Hitler found a scapegoat, someone to blame Germany's problems on, and said, if we can just get rid of these people, if you'll just follow me, we can erase all these problems. So finally, they always expect the crowds to back them up. I've got your back. You've got to have mine. Okay. no matter what, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how difficult things are, even if they say horrible things about me, it's fake. Those things aren't real. What you need to believe in is me. You need to have my back. All right. So that's the kind of rhetoric you typically see from fascist leaders. So here's probably the scariest part of all of this. Fascist states don't just blow up out of nowhere. Most of them come out of democracies that fall apart. Okay. Why? There's been a lot of talk and a lot of just concern over what direction our country's headed in, and worry about whether or not we could ever turn into something like this. And some Americans just think there's no way. America's always been American. It's always going to be America. It's not the case. Fascists rarely just take control overnight with some violent overthrow. They get themselves into a democracy. They destroy it from the inside out. And then they keep the framework there to make it and still claim it's a democracy or whatever, but it's really just them. And that's it. They become the law. They become the Constitution. They become the government. Okay. And then once they have the power, that's when the violence comes. That's when they start to go after people, because once they have the power to go after their enemies and silence the people that speak out against them, then they'll do it. So it's usually a slow process that is that takes place over time, that people don't recognize it as it's happening. Okay. So Hitler did not take power in a violent overthrow. He worked his way, he got elected, he worked his way up. He gained popularity within a political party. The Nazi Party actually had nothing to do with Jews or anything like that. When he started with it, it was a workers' party. But as he became more popular, he made it to be about what he wanted it to be about. And then he took power, and then he gained more power and more power. And before you knew it, he's the Führer. He's the dictator. Okay. And so there's examples of this today, places like Turkey and other places throughout the world where we have seen the exact type of thing happen. So it's slowly, it happens quietly, and most people only notice it when it's too late. There's an analogy coming up somewhere in here along the way. I'm going to say it now just in case I miss it later on or whatever. There's a quote from a German who watched this happen back in the 30s. That said it was like watching the corn grow. Okay. If you stand there and you look at the corn and you watch it, it doesn't move, and if you walk out from one day to the next, it looks the same. But then all of a sudden one day you walk outside and it's 3 feet over your head, because you don't see it growing. It just it's slow and persistent, but then all of a sudden it's way over your head and you have no idea how it got there. Same deal here. Okay. All right. So what can we learn from Hitler's rise? All right. Hitler is a guy that was a radical, that developed his beliefs during extreme times, World War I and its aftermath, when Germany just was destroyed and blamed for the entire war. And so the thing is he tried to start a movement right then, and it failed. But then things got even more extreme. When the Great Depression hit the world, it hammered Germany harder than everybody else because they were so downtrodden after World War I. And so when the Great Depression hits, it blasts Germany, and now people are running around looking for messiahs all over the place. There's cults that are being led by magicians. Most people don't really know that or understand that. It's like Germany was. People would say, how could someone hand power over to a guy like Adolf Hitler? They were looking to hand power over to anybody who was going to, make things right for them. They didn't even care. They were just that desperate. Hitler took advantage of that, and he played on their emotions, and everybody was scared. We don't know, many of us don't know what it's like to truly be scared in the United States of America. Because we are the wealthiest country in the world. And that's not to say that there are not people that have hardships. We all have our own hardships, and we all have our own things that we have to deal with. But we don't know the kind of desperation that was known in Germany in the early 30s. And Hitler pounced on it. He took advantage of it. He took advantage of their fear, and he knew that people were ready to buy into whatever he sold them. And so he knew and believed that it didn't really matter what it was. People weren't going to be too picky about what they've put their faith in. They just wanted to put it into something, and they wanted some results. And so he spoke to their anger. He played on their fears, and he gave them a cause to rally behind. So he fed off of how his speeches like made other people angry, and played to the crowds that way and said, hey, the reason they hate this is because they know that I'm right, and things like that. When we look back at Hitler, he was awful. He was evil. Okay. And his crowds ate it up. All right. I'm going to come back to this screen here in just a second. But this is from the OSS, which would eventually turn into the CIA here in America. They were, even back in World War II, they were doing secret agent type stuff and developing profiles on people. And so this was from a profile on Adolf Hitler. It says his primary rules were never let people cool off, never admit being wrong, never give in and admit that there may be some good in your enemy. Okay, that the other guy is always wrong and he's evil, and I mean that's not the way that we want to be. We may disagree over things with our fellow Americans, but we want to admit that, hey, they're a person too. They're a good person. They want what's best for America. They just see things in a different way. But there's not much of that going around right now, and that's one of the reasons why people are so scared, because this is that I'm right and you're evil, and my side's always going to be good and your side's always going to be bad. That's the kind of stuff that guys like Adolf Hitler play off of. Okay. And also, you see in there, people will believe a big lie sooner than a little one. Just repeat it over and over and over again. People are going to believe it. Okay. Attacking the truth. We've talked about how valuable the truth is. That's why if we just say the truth doesn't matter, guys like Hitler, they're going to take advantage of that. He convinced his supporters that, no matter what everybody says, I love you. You're my people. I care for you. And even when it got down to it, when it became obvious with the things that Hitler was doing, where he just did not value those people's lives at all, they still followed him every step of the way. Okay. So Hitler admitted on purpose that he was going to tell these massive untruths, but that was part of his plan. And so he took all of Germany's problems, very complex issues with World War One and the Great Depression and all these things that are really complex, and he boiled it down to just this very simple thing that, even though it wasn't true, it was completely ridiculously false, but he boiled it down into something simple, to a simple choice that people could understand in their desperation. And so it was, hey, look, we're going to win. The Aryan race in Germany is going to win out, and Germany is going to succeed, or we're all going to be destroyed by the Jewish people. The Jewish people were not a threat to destroy Germany in any way, shape, or form. They had no military power. They had no secret society that was running the country behind closed doors. None of that stuff existed, but Hitler had people convinced it's either us or the Jews, and that's that. So we got to be wary of stuff when people come in and say, hey, look, this really complex thing is actually really simple, and here's a solution to your problem, and I'm the only one that can create it. I'm the only one that can make it happen. And these guys are the bad guys. That's all the tactics of these guys like Hitler. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do this slide, and then I'm going to stop this here, and then I'll come back. And so basically I'm just going to cut this presentation in half so that we can break it up, because it's going to be a little bit longer one. All right. So here's the last part of this one. Fascism, not exceptional. All right. Fascism is actually more the norm. A successful democracy is kind of really the exception to the rule. And that's why we need to value what we have and take care of it. Okay. There's never been a country in the history of the world like the United States of America. And there's a reason for that. A democracy it's hard work, but when you look at what the alternatives are, it's worth it. Okay. During the post-World War period, we've seen issues in countries, including America, that have if you go back to the Great Depression, America was almost in a situation, and there were guys running around that were basically kind of threatening to take advantage of how bad things were, and destroy our democracy. Huey Long was a guy. And you can look him up. We talk about him in U.S. history. He was a guy that was ready and maybe willing to blow up the United States of America, and there were plenty of people following him around. Okay, you saw fascist movements in Great Britain and some other places that we consider these big, strong democracies. Today, fascism is alive and well in places like Venezuela, Hungary, North Korea, etc. Venezuela, and I mean, I'll say this: you can look at Venezuela as a really good example. Okay, you got Hugo Chavez, who was a guy that came to power and used his absolute power. I mean, mostly for good. Okay, and that's one of the bonuses of having someone that has absolute power is if they say something, it happens. The problem is that those guys don't live forever. They're very rare. When you do have a guy that uses his power for good, and many people would claim he abused his power in a lot of different ways, but he tried to be productive in a good way with it. Better than most people in his position would. But he died, and now there's another guy in his place, and that guy is an evil, awful dictator that has tormented his people. So, yeah, a dictator can make things happen and snap their fingers to a certain degree, but you're totally at the whims of that person. And what happens if they're not a good person? Okay. Most people who have that kind of power can't handle it. You took Western civilizations and learned about ancient Rome. Octavian, kind of a similar deal. He was the first emperor of Rome and used all his power that he had brought together to try to make Rome a better place. But then he died. And then you had all kinds of crazy guys that became emperor, Nero and people like that, that just absolutely made life a living hell for their people because there was nothing that could be done. These guys had absolute power and there was nothing to stop them. All right. So that puts us at roughly the halfway point. So if I'm just going to keep going, and if you want to hit the pause button and take a break, you can do that. I'm going to just keep rocking through this and hopefully get through the second half a little quicker than the first half. So should we be concerned as Americans? Okay, so we've looked at how things can take place, how they can happen, but should we be concerned about where we're at right now? All right. And one of our biggest problems is that we believe that nothing bad could ever happen here. And a lot of people look back to 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union collapsed, and everybody thought that's it. Democracy won. If you remember the Cold War at all, democracy wins. The game's all over, and America's going to be America forever, and we're going to be at the top of the heap forever. But increasingly, there's some pretty bad warning signs. Okay. People that watch democracies around the world are starting to look at them and say they're not looking very healthy. There's major issues with the worldwide economy, including in the United States. And so a lot of people are out of work, looking for a job, starting to believe that things aren't working for them, and they're open-minded about other things. Maybe they'll be open to some person who's willing to come in and sell them a bunch of stuff about how great things are going to be, and they'll be willing to hand power over to people like that because they're tired of the way that things are. So that's definitely something that we've got to be on our guard for. There's just a lot of ingredients out there right now that could shake people's faith and make them have doubts. And doubt is a dangerous thing when you're talking about democracy. There's also the impact of technology that we have now that makes the world a very different place and makes it a little bit more dangerous. Okay. One, to kind of add to the just the unrest that people have and being scared is just, technology's upended a lot of things. If you think back to, years ago, if you went to a big city, you're going to have to wave down a yellow cab. And those people, to earn the right to drive a cab, they had to buy their own cab and to have a to basically be branded as an official cab driver. They had to get these medallions and things like that, and it took them forever to earn those things, and then they would sell them off, and that would be their retirement. And now, you guys know, we have things like Uber, and those people are all out of work, and their life's work is basically become worthless. And there's plenty of other professions that, I mean, people used to be able to do that they can't do anymore because it's not needed. And how much more of that are we going to see after this pandemic that we're going through ends, where businesses are going to decide that they can just cut some things out and they don't really need them anymore. So that means there's a lot of people who are going to be looking for work and going to be desperate and looking for someone to help them out and look for leadership. Where's that going to come from? So the other thing is, we've talked a little bit about fake news already. Technology has disrupted the trust between the people and their government. So fake news is, like I said, it's not new, but it's never been able to be produced the way that it is now. And it's never been able to be distributed the way that it is now. And so people have lost a ton of trust in their leadership because of that. You see something on Facebook, you don't know where it's coming from. Okay. It could be a responsible person, a journalist who's doing this and doing it for the right reasons, or someone who's playing a prank, or a foreign government, or a bot, or whatever. Okay. So all these things kind of brought together creates kind of a perfect breeding ground for someone to come swooping in and take advantage of the situation. So, final analysis here. Can it happen here? Okay. Well, our democracy is not in danger of turning into a fascist state overnight. America's built strong, and even though we have these things that make it really frustrating sometimes and makes it seem like it's hard to ever get anything done, that's also kind of done by design so that no one person can swoop in and just take total power. Okay. Sometimes we wish that things would move faster and that there wouldn't be so much friction in our government, but that friction's also kind of kept us America. Okay. And kept us from collapsing under things that have killed other countries. But the thing is, it's scary is it's not impossible right now to visualize the wrong kind of circumstances. There's so much unrest out there right now. There's just things that, protests in the streets constantly. People fed up with the way things are. They're tired of not having a job. They're tired of not getting paid enough. They're tired of thinking that their government doesn't ever change anything. They're tired of seeing things not get done. Laws, the Congress is not passing that people feel like should be, just taken care of. People are frustrated with the lack of just progress in a lot of ways, and they're frustrated with their lives. I think a lot of people are, and so that's going to make folks willing again to buy into things that they normally wouldn't. Okay. So the other big thing is that we have so much faith in our government and so much faith in our democracy in some ways, even though we are frustrated with it. We just kind of believe, hey, it's always been there. America's been the most powerful country in the world for like 100 years. And so we think it's always going to be that way. But remember, things could change right underneath our nose if we're not paying attention. So we right now are living in such a divided time, and people are getting their information from all these different sources. And it's not just that they're getting different opinions about things. They are living in different universes where you can flip the channel and hear a totally different set of facts from what other people are hearing. And that makes it so difficult for us to ever meet in the middle on anything. So people are creating their own realities and universes, and they'd rather live there than coexist with other people who think differently than them. And that's a very dangerous thing. All right. So last slide here. We live in the most powerful and successful country in the history of the world, but we're fools if we think that the United States of America is invincible. The media and our politicians and our own culture push us to fear outside forces, to fear the other people, and pushes it, and that pits us against one another. It divides us, and that's really, really dangerous, like we've said over and over again. And so all you talk about all those things and all these outside things, people have asked forever, what's going to be the thing that conquers America? Well, the most likely scenario is that we conquer ourselves, by, just dividing ourselves against each other, and not caring about the truth, and being okay with being told to be afraid all the time and all these other things. That's what's going to cause problems for us. So we've got to value what we have and pay attention, and understand that the truth is important, and do everything we can to try and inform ourselves, and just try to figure out what our part is in democracy, and do that. Okay, vote, do some of those other things that we've talked about, as far as making sure we're not contributing to things that tear us apart and things like that. We got to take those things seriously and understand that if we don't, we're going to be the only people we're going to have to blame if things go south here in America. The only people we're going to have to blame is ourselves. So we got to take it seriously. Okay. So appreciate you guys listening to this, and I will see you soon.